Hello, today is March 22nd, 2024, and I'm here with my good friend Bill Krapinski. Bill, who are you? What are you known for? Why am I interviewing you?
Well, hi Debbie. Yeah, I generally tell people that I'm a graphic artist and illustrator and a political cartoonist and an activist of sorts.
Uh-huh. And where were you born?
I'm originally from Milwaukee. I grew up on the south side.
Uh-huh. Okay. And did you have a happy childhood?
Yeah, I think so. You know, other than getting beat up by older brothers.
Oh, that's normal.
Yeah.
And you're a very artistic guy. When did that all start? Ever since you were a dinky kid?
Yeah, well, I tried to remember one time, and what I came up with was when my one grandfather died. My mom was clearing out the house, and I was a little kid, and I kept getting in the way, and so she rolled out a roll of shelf paper and threw some crayons down and said, "Have at it." And so I crawled down there with my sticky little hands, and I haven't stopped drawing since.
Wow. Well, you're an amazing artist. Later on, we could take the camera around and show some of your wonderful artwork. And I've written some books, and Bill is my cover designer for my 5 books. So
Wow.
he's wonderful. And you also have a bit of a rebellious spirit, I think. When did that all start?
Oh, probably early on. I've always been kind of a troublemaker.
Really?
Well, more like, I don't know, because I was the youngest of 3, and I kind of had to defend myself a lot of times, so that's probably kind of where that came from.
Oh, okay. Did you get along with your brothers and your folks okay? Or?
Well, you know, I got along more with Doug than Bob, and Bob was kind of a bully and all that, but yet he was a big influence on my life because he was, you know, the oldest, and
Uh-huh.
so there's good and there's bad points to that. He influenced me in a lot of ways of getting involved in politics and graphic art because that's where he kind of started, or rather that's where he got me started.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, and you've become quite political. We'll talk about that a little bit too, wherever that started. Why don't we just talk about that now? When did you start getting interested in politics?
Well, you know, if I look back all the way, I think it's rooted in the fact that I had a paper route as a kid, and I delivered Sunday papers, and so I always like to say that I have the ink in my blood from that and the fact that my dad was in printing, and so sometimes he would take me to he started out at Googler Lithographic downtown, and he was a stat cameraman. So he would show me this kind of stuff and how the technical end of printing went, and so it kind of started from there, and so my first memory of, like, say, political cartoons was in those days. Editorial cartoons were on the front page, and they're usually done with a grease pencil, which is a lithographic technique, and so you could get good shading and stuff. But because I was so young, and my dad never explained anything to me, and I didn't really dare ask because he felt children should be seen and not heard. So so I would look at the front, you know, I'm delivering my papers, and I would look at that cartoon and I'd try to figure it out, having no context. I'm like, you know, in whatever, 7th grade or 5th grade or whatever it was. And so for the longest time, I thought that the cartoon was connected to the front page story, which sometimes it was and sometimes it wasn't. And so I would just study that for hours, and it never really occurred to me to ask anybody. So that's kind of where my curiosity got started, and I just came to love cartooning as an offshoot of having delivered the Sunday comics in the Sunday paper, and so my love of comics started there, and then was expanded through the the front page editorial cartoons. And then as I grew older, then I got, you know, comic books, and then graduated to Mad Magazine, and like so many other people. And then in high school, there's, this was a big thing at the time, was Ed Big Daddy Roth and the Rat Fink.
Oh,
That was like the custom culture in California with the dragsters. And,
were you kind of a hippie?
well, that was before hippies.
Oh, wow.
That was like in the early 60s or so.
Okay.
And so, you know, custom culture was all part of that California culture, like like think the Beach Boys and Jan and Dean and that kind of music. And so,
And this is before Haight-Ashbury and all that.
right, or that just kind of segued into that. So one
Gotcha.
kind of led into the other.
Yeah. How was the scene in Milwaukee? You were around Brady Street and.
Well, at that time, I was still in high school, in 68 or 7 or whatever. And then when the hippie thing came out, I mean, I was like, you know, young. I was freshman or a sophomore in high school. And so I got that mostly from the music that was on the radio. And I didn't really understand the context and that necessarily, because most of it was kind of love, fun songs and stuff, but it started morphing and all that due to the Vietnam War
Yeah.
being more and more intense and being more part of the news, and then through that, music became an outlet for that. Like, say you had like the Mamas and Papas would have, you know, California Dreaming, and Eric Burdon, the Animals would have, you know, that became an anthem during Vietnam Wars. We got to get out of this place. It was a very powerful.
We gotta get out of this place.
And you know, he just had this very urgent voice, and
Yeah.
and a lot of vets, you know, that was their song. And so those things, it was just kind of absorbing through or popular culture. And then, of course, in those days, you actually had news and current affairs classes in high school, which you don't have that anymore. Or even history. I don't even know if they have history anymore.
Don't know. We didn't get much history in my class even back then, unfortunately. Were you active in debate or
Oh, they called it civics.
civics? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what were the first big news stories that really you remember? Well, I suppose Kennedy being assassinated.
Yeah, I mean, I was like I don't know, 11, 12, somewhere in there when that happened. So that was, you know, and being kids, we didn't really have a lot of understanding or context of that, but it was, you know, everybody was just crushed, you know, and that was the kind of the beginning of that generation of, because then it was civil rights, and that was all the big news, and my mom was actually involved a fair amount in civil rights because she was the choir director at our church and the organist, and so she became part of this, I don't know if it's a program or whatever, but churches would trade choirs.
Oh.
And so once a month, this choir from the inner city of Milwaukee with a black church would come and sing at our church, and then our choir would go sing in the church in the inner city. And so we got to interact and meet with people that we, you know, living in suburban Milwaukee area was totally white people who didn't have any clue what other people in the world were like, you know.
Wow.
And
what religion were you?
United Church of Christ.
Oh, uh-huh.
I always think of it as like Lutheran Light or something.
Do you remember Father Grappi and all that history?
Yes, and I remember the time that they...
he was a big an activist for civil rights in
Right.
Milwaukee in the 60s.
Yeah, and for open housing, because that was the big issue in Milwaukee, because there was redlining and all that stuff, and yeah, it became a big deal, and I think it must have been, what, 66 or so, that there was all these demonstrations and he was leading and he was getting arrested, and you know, in our area it was all white people, and they were generally mostly racist people, or if nothing else they had never had any interaction with any other type of people. And so on this one occasion there was a rumor started that all Father Grappi was going to lead all these black housing protesters across the I forget it was the 16th Street or the 35th Street viaduct and invade the South Side, and so everybody all bent out of shape, and so it was during the summer, so they didn't have to close school, but what they did, at least in Greendale, I think the whole South Side, is they put a curfew on the whole part of town, and we want to pause that. This thing's the tea's going on.